going to start with sort of the landscape around your campaign. You know, you've got a Republican mega donor funding one of your main super PACs. You've got Ron DeSantis saying he'd put you in his cabinet. Key allies of Donald Trump are saying they want you to be Trump's running mate. Why are you Republicans' favorite Democrat?
Well, you know, I started out this campaign saying that I wanted to end the toxic polarization that is dividing America, that I think is as dangerous as any time since the American Civil War. And, you know, a lot of people agree with that. A lot of Americans agree with that. They talk about the future in apocalyptical terms because of the division and don't see where there's a good end. And I feel like somebody needs to stand up and stop talking so much, focusing so much on the issues that divide us, and talk instead about the values that bring us together. And I will talk to anybody. You know, I'm happy to talk to Donald Trump or Joe Biden. I don't attack either of them personally. I talk about their issues critically.
But for Democratic voters, when they hear that a Republican is funding one of your PACs, maybe that gives them pause.
Well, but he's not the only funder of my PAC.
But he's a big one.
Well, yeah, but I've got ones that are equally big who are Democrats. I think that's a good thing.
So to Roger Stone and Steve Bannon, no, you don't want to run with Trump.
No, I don't. No, I'm not going to run for with President Trump, but I'm flattered by the offer.
Okay. You know, I think you've praised other people who are running as independents. Would you yourself ever do that?
I don't think so.
Why?
Because I'm a Democrat. I really feel like the Democratic Party has lost its way. If you look at all the issues that I stand for, if you go through the issues that my father and my uncle stood for, I can go and check every one of those boxes. And those are the issues that I believe. I believe, you know, the Democratic Party traditionally was anti-war. We were against censorship. We were not a good home for the neocons. Those were Republicans, a very aggressive, pugnacious, belligerent foreign policy that they represent, which the Democrats are always against. We were the party that was against Wall Street instead of inviting Wall Street to strip mine the American public and destroy the American middle class. You know, my Democratic Party was the party that represents the middle class and represents the poor in the country. And I want to bring the Democratic Party back to those original values. You
know, something that Democrats have touted over the last 2 years, one of their biggest accomplishments is the Inflation Reduction Act. What parts of that legislation spoke to you?
Well, I'm going to tell you one of the worst parts of it for Iowa is the big climate control initiative. The biggest accomplishment for the Biden administration, according to them, is the carbon capture provision.
Yep.
So that, instead of doing carbon capture, it has become a mechanism for the biggest boondoggle ever to the oil industry. In this state alone, there's 3 pipelines currently being, you know, under consideration.
Yeah.
They're going to be given the ability to take property from Iowa farmers, the best farmland in the world.
Eminent domain.
Eminent domain, and it's a total distortion of eminent domain in the Fifth Amendment. And those pipelines are going to be used to extract the last oil from the Bakken crude and from the southern Illinois oil fields. And, you know, it's $173 billion of taxpayer money that's being shifted to the oil industry and to big ag. 80% of Iowans oppose it.
Right.
And 45 counties have protested to the Iowa Utility Board. Why is it being built? Because Bruce Ratzetter has contributed $1.6 million to high-level Republicans in this state, including $163,000 to the governor. And they're ramming this boondoggle ahead, which is going to help big oil, and it's going to do nothing in terms of limiting climate.
So with all that being said, would you have signed the Inflation Reduction Act?
No, I would not have.
No.
I would not, because of that alone. That's $173 billion being given to under a pretext.
But it's also one of the biggest investments in fighting climate change that the government has ever embarked on.
Well, they say that this is fighting climate change. It's actually doing the opposite.
Okay. Why do you feel that way? I mean, there were tons of subsidies in there for capping carbon emissions.
Yeah, but it's not. It's not going to reduce carbon. It's going to probably increase carbon, because it's going to increase the capacity for the Bakken oil wells and for the Southern Illinois oil wells to continue to operate for years after they would otherwise die.
One of the other things that Democrats in Washington have been focused on is codifying protections for abortion access. Would you sign a federal protection to protect the rights that were in the Roe precedent if you were president?
I believe that a decision to abort a child should be up to the women during the first 3 months of life.
So you would cap it at 15 weeks?
Yes.
Or 21
Yes.
weeks?
Yeah, for 3 months.
So 3 months. You would sign a federal cap on that?
Yes, I would.
Okay. So not unlimited access to abortion, as many in the Democratic Party.
I think the states, once a child is viable outside the womb, I think then the state has an interest in protecting that child. That supersedes, and I think that the state has an interest at every level, but at some point, I'm for medical freedom. I think individuals ought to be able to make their own choices.
Which is why I'm surprised to hear you say you'd cap it.
Well, because, I think at some point you'd say, the state, I would personally not. I think the states have a right to protect a child once the child becomes viable. That right increases. And I think there's very, very few abortions that are performed after that period of time anyway. Most abortions are performed during the first 3 months of life. And I think that's when, I feel I fought harder than anybody in this country for medical freedom.
Yeah. Can you tell me what day one of the Kennedy administration would look like? What's the first thing you would do getting in the Oval? Let's say the first 100 days, first of all, I'm going to go to the agencies, and I'm going to go to Bethesda, I'm going to go see DOT, I'm going to go see USDA, and begin the process of unraveling corporate capture of those agencies, this corrupt merger of state and corporate power that is strip mining American middle class of their equity and their wealth. Okay. That's first 100 days, corporate capture. Okay. Do you think, I wanted to switch to sort of the landscape that you're running in, do you think that active litigation against Hunter Biden prevents Joe Biden from being a viable candidate right now?
Oh, I wouldn't comment on that. I'm
Who's your chief rival?
I'm leaving the litigation to the courts, and I'm trying to stay out of the personal issues of the candidates and focus on the issues that affect all Americans.
What does it say to you that both frontrunners in your party and on the Republican side are embroiled in legal troubles? Trump's got 3 indictments. Does that disqualify him?
Indictments don't disqualify anybody. Convictions might, but indictments don't. But I think we're living in a weird period of history right now.
Maybe the understatement of the century. Yeah. I want to talk to you also about, how do you stay informed? What are your news sources? Where are you going? How are you taking in information, making big decisions?
I'm eclectic in my news sources. I look at everything. I read continuously, and I try to read everybody. I look at the left, I look at the right. I do not believe anything that I see on network television at this point, because I think it's all distorted by agendas. Mm-hmm. And so I try to go to, in science, I read the scientific journals, and I read a lot of more obscure sites. I spend a lot of time on Substack, with people who are subject matter experts, and I've developed trust in a lot of those people, and I think that's what everybody has to do to live in our democracy right now. You have to maintain a constant posture of skepticism towards news sources, because we don't have Walter Cronkite anymore. CNN and MSNBC are pushing the agenda of the left. Fox News is pushing the agenda of the right. And, you know, it's hard to, and they're not really doing what Walter Cronkite used to do, who's the most trusted man in the world.
I disagree with some of the characterizations, but I allow you the point. One of the things, though, that comes up when people start looking in other places for information are certain conspiracy theories, for example, about the 2020 election. Do you believe that Donald Trump lost the 2020 election?
I believe that he lost the 2020 election, but, you know, look, I think elections can get stolen in this country.
Is that what happened in 2020?
In 2001, it was clearly, you know, I think most Democrats believe it was stolen in 2001.
From Gore to Bush.
Yeah, and that it was stolen in 2004 from Kerry. Hillary Clinton has suggested that the 2016 election was stolen from her. Bernie Sanders, his supporters believe the election was stolen from him. I don't think Americans who suggest that election can be stolen, I think they should be listened to. Their evidence should be seen and considered, and they shouldn't be dismissed as people who are enemies of the United States. We have an election system that is broken because elections can be, you know, tampered with. And we ought to fix that. You know,
do you believe that Trump tried to overturn the election results based on what you've seen?
What I've seen, it seems like he was trying to overturn it.
And is that, when you look at the fact that he's been indicted for that, is that an impeachable offense? I don't mean that in the official sense.
Well,
I mean it like disqualifying to be president again.
It may be impeachable if he broke a law. You know, I was reading this morning that there's a Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, that there's a provision that he may have violated.
Yeah.
And may or may not disqualify him, but that's up to the courts, and I'm not going to, you know, get involved in that debate because it's inflammatory, and it really is not about the concerns that most Americans now have, which is feeding their family and paying their mortgages and paying their bills.
Can we talk about foreign policy briefly?
Yeah.
You've criticized the way that Joe Biden has handled the Ukraine situation.
Yeah.
What would you have done differently if you were in the Oval when Russia invaded Ukraine?
I don't believe Russia would have invaded if I had been in the Oval Office because the Russians tried to settle it before they went in. They wanted to sign the Minsk Accords. The Minsk Accords were going to settle the whole thing. They would have left Donbass as part of Ukraine as a semi-autonomous region, but given the ethnic Russians the right to speak their own language and protection from government violence. The Russians wanted to sign it, the Germans approved it, the French approved it, and Zelensky ran in 2019 and got 70% of the vote, promising to sign it.
So is this Zelensky's fault?
No, it's our fault because we went over there and told Zelensky he couldn't sign it. Then the Russians put 40,000 troops in, not to take over the country because you can't do it with 40,000 troops, but to bring us back to the negotiating table. Zelensky went back to the negotiating table, signed an agreement in March of 2022, and the Russians signed it and were withdrawing their troops. And in April, Joe Biden sent Boris Johnson to the Ukraine to blow up that agreement. As a direct result of that intervention by our White House, 350,000 Ukrainian kids have died. Oh, this is not a war that the Ukrainians wanted. They gave Zelensky 70% of the vote when he was running as a peace candidate, promising to sign the agreement. We're the ones that wanted the war. And, you know, even Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin, that same month that we blew up the agreement, when he was asked, why are we in Ukraine? He didn't say it's to protect Ukrainian freedom. He said it's to exhaust the Russian army and degrade its capacity to fight elsewhere in the world. And Biden, when he was asked that month, and we're there to do regime change with Vladimir Putin. But that's not about Ukraine. That is, what that indicates is Ukraine is a pawn in a proxy war, in a geopolitical proxy war between Russia and the United States.
That much has always been clear, right? I mean, do you think that we should
continue
helping them in that fight then?
I think we should settle the fight. I think we should settle it the way that...
By using U.S. troops?
No.
Oh, okay.
By negotiating a peace agreement.
Got it.
I don't think we should send U.S. troops.
Okay. When you say we, I just wanted to check.
Oh, well, we're funding it. I mean, Biden just is now asking for another $40 billion.
And would you do that if you were
No,
president?
of course not. We need that money here. We're borrowing $6 billion a day from China to fund the war over there. CDC's entire budget is $12 billion. EPA's entire budget is $12 billion. We sent already $113 billion over there. We don't have that money. We're like an alcoholic who's, behind on the mortgage and is taking the milk money to the bar and buying rounds for strangers. That's what we're doing in Ukraine, and it's a war that we started, that we provoked.
Thank you for letting me cover a million topics. I
Thank
really
you.
appreciate it.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.